I never thought I'd end up in this situation, honestly. It's one of those phrases people say, and it sounds cliché, but when you're in the middle of it, when you feel that cold sweat sliding down the back of your neck and your legs too heavy to run, it becomes the most honest thing you've ever said in your life. I'd always seen this happening to other guys in the neighborhood. Marquinho, who disappeared on a Friday and came back on Monday with a black eye and never talked about the weekend again. Danilo, who everyone knew had messed up, and one day he just wasn't around anymore. I used to see all that and think those were stories about people who made the wrong choices, people who didn't pay attention. With me it felt distant, impossible, because I thought I understood the rules better than they did. How naive I was. That day I woke up already feeling something was off. It wasn't hunger, it wasn't leftover sleepiness, it wasn't any kind of physical discomfort I could name. It was something deeper, more visceral, like some part of me already knew what my brain still refused to admit. The room was still dark when I opened my eyes, sunlight barely starting to leak through the slats of the window, and I lay there for a few minutes just listening to the sounds of the house. My mum in the kitchen, moving pots around, that familiar noise she made every day, a dog barking outside, a motorcycle revving on the street, everything the same, everything wrong. I had been called to do a more serious run. It wasn't just watching for police or strangers like before. That kind of thing I already did almost automatically. It was simple, predictable. This was something bigger, more important, and it had already put a weight on my chest from the moment I got the message the night before. Like a stone slowly settling in. Something you try to ignore, but that's there all the time. I got up, took a shower, ate something without even knowing what it was. My mum tried to talk to me and I answered in monosyllables, staring at my plate, pretending I was distracted instead of mentally rehearsing every step of what was coming next. Even so, I went, because once you're in this, there isn't much room to refuse. The logic is different, the vocabulary is different, and the consequence of saying no is sometimes worse than the consequence of saying yes and getting it wrong. And also because the money was coming too easily, and I had already started depending on it without realizing, really not realizing. Not just pretending I didn't. I'd bought sneakers, helped with bills at home, gone out with people who wouldn't even look at me before. The money had become a kind of glue holding everything together, and suddenly taking that glue away felt impossible. But that day, walking toward the spot they had given me, I felt like it wasn't just another normal day. The sun looked the way it always did. The kids on the sidewalk were playing like usual. The street market on the next block made the same noise as always. But something was out of place, like when you walk into a room and know something has been moved, but you can't tell what. Even the silence on the street felt strange. Not a peaceful silence, but that tense, heavy silence that comes right before something happens. I should have left. They put me at a specific spot to keep watch, a street that looked completely ordinary to anyone passing by, colorful houses with barred windows, a bar on the corner with plastic chairs on the sidewalk, a newsstand that sold more ice cream than newspapers. To any passerby, it was just another part of the city. But at that time, there was something going on that couldn't go wrong. A movement I couldn't see but knew was there, like a mechanism inside a closed box that only works as long as no one opens the lid. I knew exactly what I had to watch for and when to report it. They had repeated it several times to me with the patience of someone giving directions over the phone. Such and such car, such and such clothes, such and such signal. Confirm it and send the message. Simple like that, on paper. But paper never tells you about the real pressure, about how time behaves strangely when you're nervous, how each minute feels like an hour and each hour disappears in the blink of an eye. Time dragged on too slowly, and I started getting nervous about everything. Any car that slowed down at the corner made me tense up. Anyone who looked a little too long made me spin my phone in my hand, finger ready to send a message. I was hyper alert, which paradoxically made me less efficient. Too much information hitting me at once, and my inexperienced brain couldn't filter what mattered from what was just noise. There was a moment when I thought it was a false alarm, a car that seemed suspicious but then parked normally, and a family got out carrying grocery bags. I relaxed for a second, just 1 second, and it was in that second that what mattered happened. By the time I noticed, by the time my eyes returned to the right spot, it had already passed. I took seconds to react, but they were seconds that changed everything. And the worst part wasn't what happened right there. The worst part was realizing, still standing on that sidewalk with my phone in my hand, that someone somewhere had noticed I failed. It wasn't an abstract feeling, it was a silent certainty that settled in my stomach like cold water. After everything happened, there was no shouting, no chaos like I had imagined. In my head, I had built a movie scene. Sirens, people running, someone yelling my name in anger. Reality was infinitely quieter and because of that much more terrifying. Everything felt muffled, quick, as if it had always been expected that something would go wrong at some point. I stayed at my spot for a few more minutes, completely frozen. not knowing whether to leave, run, or pretend nothing had happened. My phone buzzed once, a short message telling me to come back. There were no insults, no written threats, no exclamation points, just a clean, dry instruction, like a knife going in slowly. When they stay silent, it's worse. Because silence is control, and control means they've already thought it through, already decided, and now they're just executing the plan. On the way back, it felt like everyone on the street knew what I had done. I couldn't think straight, couldn't put together any kind of justification. All I could remember was the exact moment I hesitated. That second, that fraction of attention slipping away, playing on a loop like a video YouTube puts on autoplay. When I got to the place where they were, no one said anything at first. On the way there, I had prepared myself for some kind of immediate confrontation. Question, answer, defense, resolution. That's how the world usually works. You mess up, someone points it out, you explain, and life goes on. But that place followed a different logic, and the silence there wasn't the absence of words, it was the presence of judgment. There were people there I had known for months, people who used to joke around, who treated everything like routine, who treated me like I was part of the group. In that moment, no one really looked me in the eye. It was as if I had become invisible in a way that hurt. One of the guys just motioned for me to sit and wait. I stayed there, listening to low conversations I couldn't quite understand, catching fragments, sensing from the tone that something had gone very wrong because of the delay in the warning. No one needed to explain anything to me, and understanding it didn't absolve me, it just made me more aware of the wait. The problem is that there are no small mistakes there. Any failure becomes a problem for a lot of people because everything is connected. And when one piece fails, someone pays for it. That's when, staring at my own new sneakers while pretending the floor was interesting, I started to realize that someone was most likely me. Time started to move in a strange way inside that place. With no clock on the wall, no reference point, time turns into rubber. It stretches, shrinks, loses any reliable measure. No one told me to leave, but no one spoke to me either. I was the invisible center of that room. At some point, someone quietly mentioned that something important had been lost because of the delay. They didn't say my name, but they didn't need to. I felt a knot in my stomach instantly, like I had been punched from the inside, the kind of punch that doesn't leave a bruise but echoes for days. Everything was very controlled, very managed. Chaos is something you can anticipate. Absolute control is unpredictable. After a while, I couldn't even say how long, a guy I respected a lot came over to me. I'll call him R. He didn't seem nervous or angry. If I had to describe it, he looked like someone carrying out a bureaucratic task, the kind of expression a doctor has when delivering bad news. Neutral, not out of indifference, but out of professional control. He just asked if I knew what had happened. I said yes, kind of stiff, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. He looked at me for a few seconds with that evaluative silence that feels like an exam, and then said that a mistake like that couldn't happen, especially in that kind of situation. There was no direct threat, but there was one sentence that stuck in my head. That trust is something that disappears quickly when someone fails. After that, he just walked away. He simply left as if he had said everything he needed to say, and the rest was my problem. And that's when I understood that the problem wasn't going to end there on that day. After that, no one spoke to me directly anymore. But something in the air had changed. It was in the small details, invisible to anyone who doesn't know the grammar of that environment. When people stopped talking as soon as I got close, when they avoided including me in any decision, when I asked something and the response came with just a little more delay than it should have. I stayed there a while longer until they told me to leave. No explanation, just a "we'll deal with it later," said off to the side, without looking at me, like someone discarding a piece of paper they no longer need. On the way back home, hands shoved in my pockets and head down, I kept trying to figure out what that meant. When they say later, the important word isn't deal with it, it's later. Because usually something has already been decided, and later is just when they carry it out. And the worst part is, there's no real way to run or hide. They know where you live, they know who your mother is, your sister, your friends, they know your entire routine. When I got home, I tried to act normal. My mom noticed right away. Mothers always do. She asked if I was okay. In that way of asking that already knows the answer will be a lie, but still needs to hear it. I made up some excuse and went to my room. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. I didn't sleep for a single minute. I kept reliving that second of hesitation with the involuntary cruelty the brain has when it finds the mistake you most don't want to remember. I knew the stories. Everyone who gets into this world knows them. But you learn not to count them on your fingers, because if you do, you'll realize your fingers aren't enough. People who disappeared, people who showed up days later, changed in a way that didn't need explanation. And those stories, which I had kept on a mental shelf labeled "not me," started coming down one by one, heavy. Every sound on the street made me get up, Heart racing, a motorcycle braking, a loud voice outside, the neighbor's gate slamming, every sound became a possibility. It was already fully night when my phone vibrated again. Just seeing the screen light up made my body go cold. Not a shiver, not goosebumps, but a coldness that starts in your chest and spreads to your limbs, heavy and slow. It was a number I had never seen, but I immediately knew where it was coming from. The message was simple, an address and a time. No name, no option to reply. I got up slowly, put on my sneakers in the dark without turning on the light, without waking my mom. I left the house without saying anything, and that silence of not saying goodbye weighed on me in a way I hadn't expected. The street was too quiet. I started noticing things I used to ignore: a parked car with fogged up windows and people inside, a man leaning on a corner with no cigarette, no phone, nothing, shadows. The streetlight didn't fully reach. Every step felt both rehearsed and irreversible at the same time. When I got to the spot, there was no one visible at first. The street was practically deserted, a dog sniffing around an overturned trash can, the flicker of a TV light behind a closed window. I stood there pretending to scroll on my phone with fingers that wouldn't quite cooperate, trying to look casual while my mind tracked every angle of the street. After a few minutes, a car pulled up slowly, the engine purring low like breathing. The window rolled down just enough for a hand to appear and motion me over with a short, commanding gesture. I recognized who was inside, and that didn't make me feel any better. It only confirmed that this was serious in a way there was no coming back from. I got in without saying a word. The door shut with a dry thud. No one started a conversation. The car began to move, and I had no idea where we were going. The silence inside was heavy, almost suffocating. You hear every small thing you would normally filter out: the tires against the asphalt, the air conditioning, people breathing. The car drove around for a while, longer than my brain could measure. It turned onto streets I'd never been on, made turns that didn't make any geographical sense. The kind of route meant to confuse, not to arrive, until the car finally stopped somewhere more isolated. Little lighting, no visible houses nearby. The kind of place that exists in cities without anyone really knowing it does. They told me to get out. I stepped out on legs I could barely feel, the ground seeming unstable beneath my feet. I tried to stay calm on the outside. Inside, I had already made peace with what I thought might be coming. One of the guys stepped closer. No rush, no theatrics. He spoke quietly, not because he was afraid of being overheard, but because quiet was more efficient, heavier, more final. He said that this was for me to understand how things really work. That a mistake wasn't just a mistake, it was a statement that you weren't reliable, and an unreliable person was a problem. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't touch me, he didn't need to. It was the heaviest thing I had ever heard. After that, they simply told me to leave. They got back in the car, the taillights glowed red in the darkness and faded as the car turned a corner, and I was left there, alone, in the middle of that nameless place with no explanation, nothing. I walked home, taking paths I barely recognized. There was no violence, no explicit punishment. And that's exactly why nothing ended that night, because since that day, I've never truly had peace again. No one ever brought it up again, but they never called me for anything either. To this day, I don't know if that was a warning or just a pause before something worse. I learned to live with that doubt lodged inside me, like someone learning to live with a chronic pain that doesn't kill you but never goes away. I got out of all of it, at least for now, at least as far as I can tell, but the feeling never leaves me, because I know that somewhere, in some mind that deals with this kind of thing, someone still remembers that mistake. And in this kind of world, forgetting is not part of it.